Africa will not come onto the scene in a big impact way in the coming decade, but it may do in the decades that follow. And China appreciates that. China's not doing much, as I said, in the way of direct, massive, large-scale ag investment at the moment in Africa, but I think that that will change. The question is, what are the implications of this for the US? In my view is, in the short term, I think it's pretty good. This demand profile, whether it's coming from China, who's leading it, or from India, who is probably second in terms of the overall impact on global demand markets, or from Africa, who's becoming increasingly a factor in that sense, is it's good for the pricing profile. But that is a near-term status. The question is, what are the impacts from the medium to the long term? Increasingly, I think that the West, and by that I mean Europe and the US, Canada, are increasingly irrelevant to the overall program. I'm not saying that's a factor in the next 5 years, but I think if you look out 50 years, we're increasingly irrelevant. The Chinese colleague of mine said, 2,000 years ago, we knew that we were so much more advanced than the West, and in 200 years' time, we know that we will again be more advanced than the West. And that is where I think, from a longer-term outlook, we need to open our eyes, we need to engage. The Chinese, I think, are very pragmatic. I think that they are certainly there to stay. We haven't got an option on this. And I think that we've got to stay competitive. And by that, I mean, we've got to continue pushing the technology that the West has been so good at in the agriculture sense. I think we've got to start looking at improving the infrastructure. We've got a lot of old, increasingly obsolete infrastructure in Europe and the States and Canada. We've got to start revitalizing that in order to remain competitive. And finally, I think fundamentally, the important part of the competitive perspective for me is we've got to keep getting up in the morning and getting the job done, which is something that the US farming industry has always done better than anyone else.